The night I turned 25, my parents took me to a restaurant. Not to celebrate me, to finally finish me. They had booked the corner table, worn their best clothes, rehearsed every line. And they had no idea that the family I'd been searching for my entire life was already seated 3 tables behind them. Watching. Waiting. Quiet as a secret. Before I go on, take 1 second to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because this story is about what happens when the people who were supposed to love you find out, far too late, that they already lost you. My name is Paige. And this is the night I finally stopped shrinking to fit a seat I had never once been offered. There are certain people who enter your life the way cold air enters a room. Quietly. Completely. And by the time you notice it, you're already shivering. That was Diane Mercer. My mother. At least, the woman who had called herself that for 25 years. She was elegant in the way that certain things are elegant when they have no warmth underneath them. A gray cashmere sweater saved for funerals and board meetings. Hair done. Expression measured. A woman who treated kindness like a budget item and softness like a luxury she had never been able to justify spending. My father, Wesley, was the man in her orbit. Decent, somewhere deep beneath all the choices he'd made. The kind of man who always knew the right thing and could only ever bring himself to say it after it no longer cost him a thing. And then there was me. Paige. Adopted at birth. Raised on arithmetic. I don't mean they were cruel in the way that leaves bruises. I mean they were precise. Efficient. The kind of people who calculate the difference between what a child costs and what a child generates, and make sure the numbers stay in their favor. My childhood birthdays were one candle. Singular. Pressed into a grocery store cupcake my mother bought on her way home and never thought to refrigerate. I'd watch it sweat on the counter while she finished a phone call. Across town, my cousin Brett, blood, actual blood, had bounce houses and silver trays with little quiches on them. I learned early that the word family in our house came with a price tag. And I had been assigned the discount shelf. By the time I was 9, I had stopped asking for a cake. Not because I didn't want one, but because I could see how much easier it made the arithmetic for everyone else at the table. Being easy was the only currency I owned. I left that house the week I turned 18 with 2 duffel bags and a community college acceptance letter I had filled out entirely by myself. No one drove me. No one waved from the doorway. 7 years later, I was a paralegal at a trusts and estates firm downtown, reading wills and distribution schedules for a living. I spent my days inside other people's grief, organizing the quiet language that decides who eats and who doesn't long after the funeral flowers wilt. The irony was not lost on me. I could set perfect boundaries for total strangers. I could tell a grieving widow exactly what she was owed. But I could not, for the life of me, get my own parents to want me in the room. The one person who ever made me feel like a person was my grandmother, Nana Ruth. She was the only Mercer who answered the phone like she'd been waiting for it to ring. Every Sunday, 4 o'clock, 4 years. She had opinions about everything and apologies for nothing. When I was 12 and crying in her kitchen because Brett had told me I wasn't a real Mercer, she put down her dish towel, took my chin in her hand, and said 7 words I carried for the next 13 years. You were chosen, sweetheart, not collected. Then she made me a grilled cheese and let me stay up too late. She died when I was 23. And within a month of her funeral, my parents quietly moved into the larger house. The one that had been in the family a long time. The one connected to Nana's name in ways I was only beginning to understand. The year I turned 24, something shifted. Texts that used to come back in an hour took 3 days. My mother stopped including me in the holiday planning. My Aunt Renee, Brett's mother, the woman who once explained to an 8-year-old child why she wasn't worth a party, started using a new word in the family group chat. Blood. Blood-only weekends. Blood-only cabin trips. Blood looks after blood. It wasn't drift. Families drift. This was coordinated. And the analyst inside me, the one who spent every workday reading the invisible architecture underneath people's paperwork, kept flagging it. The way you notice 3 unrelated invoices arrive on the same Tuesday and realize they are not unrelated at all. Then one evening in March, my phone lit up with my mother's name. And she called me honey. She only ever called me honey when she wanted something. We'd like to take you out, she said, her voice 3 degrees warmer than it had been in a year. Celebrate 25 properly. The way we never quite managed. Every instinct I had built in 4 years of reading other people's bad news told me the same thing. This is too neat. I said yes sweetly, the way she had taught me. And then I hung up the phone and sat at my kitchen table for a long time, thinking about timelines. About the house on Linden Road. About the word blood appearing in the chat at exactly this moment, in exactly this season. About a sentence my grandmother had whispered to me before she died, her voice thin over the phone. I made sure she told me that you'll never have to ask anyone for your own life. At the time, I thought she meant it as encouragement. I was about to find out she had meant it in writing, notarized, and filed with a bank. 6 months before that dinner, I had done 2 things that changed the arithmetic of my entire existence. The first, I registered with the State Adoption Reunion Registry. A small, quiet thing I had postponed for years out of some fear I couldn't name. 8 weeks later, a letter arrived in handwriting I had never seen. Careful and looping, the hand of a woman who had practiced what she wanted to say at least 100 times. Her name was Susan Hale. She wrote that she had been 19 when she gave me up. That she had not wanted to. That she had thought about me every March for 25 years. And that if I ever wanted to meet her, she would drive any distance, any day, no expectations. She signed her name. And then, underneath it, she wrote one more line. I never stopped saving you a seat. I read that line until the paper went soft. The second thing I had done was purely professional habit. While I was in the county system waiting on my own birth record, I had pulled the file on Nana's estate. The way a dentist looks at strangers' teeth. And there it was. The Ruth Mercer Family Trust. Executed 2 years before her death. Administered by a bank, not by my parents. The caregiver distributions to Wesley and Diane Mercer, it read, shall terminate upon the beneficiary's 25th birthday. Whereupon the remainder shall pass to my granddaughter, Paige. Not their estate. Mine. Held by a trustee they could not touch. Scheduled to leave their hands forever on the exact date they had chosen for that dinner. 2 envelopes in 1 week. One told me where I had come from. The other told me, in my grandmother's notarized hand, exactly what my parents were about to lose. And exactly why they were suddenly in such a hurry. I did not call my mother and scream the discovery down the phone. I have watched too many families destroy themselves with satisfying outbursts that lawyers later turn into evidence. I took a personal day, drove the trust documents to an estate's attorney with no connection to my family, and paid her out of my own savings to confirm what I already suspected. Their will was irrelevant. Their disownment was theater performed on the wrong stage. My attorney asked if I wanted to notify them. Get ahead of it. Soften the landing. I said no. I said I wanted 3 things in a folder. The retainer letter, so they would know I had counsel. The trust's distribution schedule, so they would see the date in black and white. And my original birth certificate, with Susan Hale's name in the mother's line. I labeled the tab. I closed the folder. I put it in my bag. And I carried it for 6 months like a quiet engine I hadn't turned on yet. The dinner invitation only told me when to turn the key. But before I walked into Van Ter with that folder under my arm, I made one more call. I called Susan. I told her everything. The parents. The house. The suspicions. The speech I could feel coming. And I told her that I no longer wanted to perform the grief they were counting on. That I didn't want to hear it alone. She didn't hesitate. Not even for a breath. What time and where? She said. And should we dress up? Then she said something that made me put my hand over my mouth standing in my own kitchen. We'd be honored, she said, to watch you not need them. So I made one more call. To the restaurant. And I booked a second table for that same evening. Under my own name. Paige Mercer. Party of 3. Table 9. 3 tables behind the reservation already on the books. Already waiting. Already mine. The restaurant was called Van Ter. White tablecloths. Low amber light. The kind of place designed to make serious conversations feel civilized. My mother wore cashmere. My father had booked the table under her name, not mine. There was no banner. No cake. No candle waiting in a kitchen somewhere with my name piped in blue. This was not a birthday dinner. I knew it the moment I sat down. I had booked enough of these tables for clients. I knew the difference between a dinner and a deposition. We ordered drinks before anyone said a true thing. My mother praised the wine list. My father told a story about parking he had already told in the car. And somewhere between the bread and the entree nobody would end up eating. Diane folded her hands, shifted into a voice I had known my whole life, and began. We've always done our very best for you. We gave you a roof. An education. More than some children ever get. I let her talk. My hand rested flat on the manila folder beside my plate, and I watched my father's eyes flick down to it and away. There was a label on the tab. Just 4 letters visible above my fingers. He looked. He looked again. And I watched the wondering start to work on him like slow weather. My mother kept going. And then she paused, took a small sip of wine, set the glass down with the precision of a woman reaching the slide she had rehearsed the longest, and said the line that opened the door to everything. There's something, Paige, that you should have been told a very long time ago. A breath. You're adopted. She said it the way you'd announce a change to a dinner reservation. Calm. Final. Practiced. And then she watched my face with the quiet hunger of a woman waiting for a building to fall. This was the moment the whole evening had been built around. The cashmere, the corner table, the controlled pauses. All of it engineered to land right here. In the second her adopted daughter learned she had never truly belonged anywhere. And broke into pieces they could sweep up and walk away from. I want to be honest. Some part of me had braced for it anyway. Some part of a person always does. But I had known for 6 months. So what she actually revealed, in that careful practice pause, was how little she knew about me. She leaned forward, almost gentle, and delivered the sentence I will carry for the rest of my life in a completely different way than she intended. We only kept you for the benefits. She smiled when she said it. That was the detail that freed me. Not the cruelty. I had been raised on the cruelty. The smile. A woman does not smile delivering the worst news of your life unless she has rehearsed it enough times to enjoy the choreography. My father, to his discredit, tried to explain it like an accountant defending a tax position. There had been subsidies in the early years. Tax considerations. And Nana, of course, who had had certain expectations about family, and adopting me had helped them meet those expectations. And meeting them, in his careful word, had been worthwhile for a good many years. I sat very still and let the arithmetic of my childhood rearrange itself into its true equation. The one candle. The hammer-downs from Brett with Renee's return tag still on them. The heat turned down in my room first. They had not been poor. They had been pocketing the difference between what a child costs and what a child generates. And I had been the generator. Then my mother cut to the line underneath all the others. The subsidy ended years ago. And what came after it ends today. You're 25 now. There's simply nothing further that keeping you does for us. My father reached into his leather portfolio and slid a thin stack of papers across the tablecloth until it touched my plate. We've already filed, he said. You won't be in the will. You won't be a beneficiary on anything of ours. We wanted to do this cleanly. I read the first page caption in 4 seconds. The way I had read 1,000 of them. And I saw immediately what they had done. They had filed against the wrong instrument. They had spent good money cutting me out of an estate that was almost beside the point, while leaving entirely untouched the document that actually decided everything. They didn't know what I knew. They thought the power in this room ran through their own modest will. So that was where they had aimed their expensive little knife. I did not correct them. You don't tell the other side they've sued the wrong defendant. You let them finish. My Aunt Renee arrived then, Brett trailing behind her. Both of them feigning the surprise of people who had been waiting in the bar for a text. Renee pressed a cold cheek to mine and got right to business. We just want what's best for the family. And families have to make hard choices about who's really part of them. You've always been such a practical girl, Paige. Blood looks after blood. I looked at my aunt, the woman who had answered for my mother when I was 8 and explained to a child why she wasn't worth a party, and I felt the last trace of obligation in me go slack. These were not people I was losing. These were people I was setting down. I had carried them a long way. Longer than they deserved. And my arms were finally, gloriously tired. Then my mother produced one more page. A pen placed across it like a small gift. "It's just an acknowledgement," she said. "That we've informed you, that you understand the situation. Sign it, and we can have a civilized dinner and go our separate ways." I looked at the language. The release paragraph opened with the exact boilerplate I had typed 100 times myself at the firm. "The undersigned hereby waives and forever releases any claim, interest, or expectancy." It wasn't an acknowledgement. It was a waiver-wearing one. A tidy little document designed to get my signature while I was still bleeding from the reveal. Before the shock wore off. Before I could think. I left the pen where it lay. My father, across from me, was pale now. Staring at the folder. The worry had climbed up his neck in a slow red tide. "Is there?" he started. Stopped. "Is there something we should know, Paige?" I smiled at him. The first real smile of the night. "Not yet," I said. And I watched that answer land on him like a stone dropped into still water. Then, quietly, without a word of explanation, I opened the folder. 3 pages. Laid side by side on the white cloth like exhibits in front of a client who needed to finally understand their own situation. The retainer letter, with my attorney's letterhead. The distribution schedule of the Ruth Mercer Family Trust, with the relevant paragraph already visible. And my original birth certificate, with Susan Hale's name in the line where my mother had assumed her own name belonged. I didn't point at anything. I let the paper do what paper does. My mother's eyes went to the trust schedule first. Because some animal part of her had always known where the money slept. I watched her read the words. I watched her reach the word remainder. And I watched the color leave her face from the top down like a window shade being drawn. She looked up at me. Then at Wesley. Then back at the page. The way people do when they're hoping the second reading will say something kinder than the first. It never does. "Mom," I said gently. Because I could afford to be gentle now. "You filed against the wrong family. The one you cut me out of was always the smaller one." The table went silent in a new way. Wesley had gone very pale. His mouth opened. No sound came out. My mother was fast, I will give her that. Even cornered, it took her 10 seconds to assemble the full picture. The house on Linden Road, funded by the trust she had assumed she would live in forever. The monthly distributions that had quietly furnished her comfortable life, ending by their own terms tonight. The remainder, the real money, the part she had spent 2 decades adjacent to and never controlling, passing on this exact date to the daughter she had just told she was finished with. And the waiver. Her clever little waiver, worth precisely nothing, because it released a claim on an estate that was never where the value lived. She had aimed every weapon she owned at a will. And missed the trust entirely. The cruelty had been free. The mistake had been expensive. And then, the moment that told me the whole truth about her, she reached across the table for my hand. Her voice went soft. Maternal. Warm in a way it had never once been when it cost her anything. "We're still your parents, Paige. Whatever's in those papers, that doesn't change what we are. We're family." The word family. From the mouth that 20 minutes earlier had said we only kept you for the benefits. I looked at her hand, reaching for mine. And I did not take it. I closed the folder. I gathered the 3 pages back into it, unhurried. I kept the pen they had brought for my surrender and set it neatly beside her plate. Then I stood up. Not dramatically. The way you rise from any table. A woman pushing her chair back and reaching for her things. My mother's mask slipped instantly. "Sit down," she said, the cold control snapping back into her voice like a bone setting. "Where on earth do you think you're going?" I picked up the folder and held it against my chest. And I looked at my mother, who had spent 25 years pressing on the wound she had helped create, and I told her where I was going in the plainest words I owned. "My birth family is sitting 3 tables behind you." She went still. And then, very slowly, she began to turn around. She turned the way you turn when some part of you already knows, and is begging the rest of you to be wrong. The cashmere shoulders rotated. Her chin came around. And there, at table 9, 3 tables back, Beneath the warm low light of the restaurant she had chosen, were Susan and Pearl and Danny, who had been there the entire time, who had ordered quietly and eaten almost nothing, who had watched my mother deliver the worst sentences of my life and kept their seats and their composure because I had asked them to let me come to them. Susan met my mother's eyes first. She didn't glare. She didn't gloat. She just looked at the woman who had raised her daughter on one candle and a calculator. And then she looked at me. And her whole face opened like a window in spring. Pearl, small and ferocious, who had looked at me the very first time we met and said, "Well, there she is," like I had only been late, not missing for 25 years, already had her napkin folded by her plate. Ready. Danny had stopped pretending to look at his phone. My mother's gaze traveled from Susan's chin to mine and back again, doing the resemblance math. And I watched the exact moment she understood that the family she had just told me I didn't have was sitting 15 feet behind her. Having witnessed every word of the one thing she could never take back, she turned back to me. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in my entire life, my mother had no script. And in the silence where her next line should have been, a chair scraped back at table 9. They stood up. All three of them. Not to make a scene, not to confront anyone. Just to be on their feet when I crossed the room to them. The way you stand for someone arriving at a gate after a very long flight. Pearl stood first, because Pearl does everything first. Then Susan. Then Danny, knocking his knee on the table leg in his hurry. They didn't say a word to my parents. They didn't have to. Their standing said the whole thing. The restaurant had gone quiet around us. The particular hush of strangers who can feel that something true is happening and have stopped pretending not to watch. A waiter froze mid-step. A man at the bar set down his glass. I walked past my mother, who was still turned half around in her chair. Past Renee, whose mouth had finally run out of the word blood. Past my father, who lifted his eyes to me as I passed, and then quietly looked back down, choosing comfort one last time. The same choice he had always made. 15 feet. 3 tables. 25 years. When I reached them, Pearl took my face in both her hands, the way Nana used to. And Susan pulled out the empty chair beside her own, the 4th chair, the one they had asked the host to set even though their reservation had been for 3. And she said the words she had written at the bottom of that very first letter. The words that had gone soft from all my reading of them. "We saved you a seat," she said. "We always did." I sat down in it. The seat that had been waiting my whole life. At the table that had wanted me before they knew if I would ever come. That was when my mother lost the one thing she had never lost in public. Her composure. I heard her chair scrape. Heard her stand. Heard the control she had worn all evening crack straight down the middle. "After everything we paid for," she said, and it wasn't quiet anymore. It traveled across that dining room, sharp and rising. "After everything we did for you. The schools, the roof, the years. You humiliate your family over money." Renee was pulling at her sleeve, hissing, "Sit down. People are looking." But my mother was past the reach of her own handler for the first time in her life. Because the script was gone. And all she had left was the truth, pouring out sideways. "We gave you everything," she said. I noticed she said gave. Not loved. Even now. Even cornered. Even standing in a silent restaurant with strangers watching. The word love would not come. Because it had never been in the inventory. I stayed in my seat. I did not stand to match her. Susan's hand had found mine beneath the table, and I held it, and I let my mother be loud. Because the loudness was doing my work for me. Every person in that restaurant was watching a calm young woman, seated quietly with people who clearly adored her, and a furious woman standing at the other end of the room, shouting about everything she had paid for. There is not a person alive who hears that and thinks, "There goes the real family." I let her run out of words the way a storm runs out of rain. And when the quiet came back, I stood for the last time, walked the 3 tables back to the front, and set a single page on the white cloth in front of her. The trust distribution schedule. Face up. I didn't need it anymore. My attorney had the originals. And I wanted my mother to have something to read on the longest evening of her life. "You can keep this one," I said. "You'll want to understand what ended today, and what didn't." She stared at the page, and I looked at the two of them one final time. My mother, who had priced me at one candle. My father, who had loved his own mother too much to honor what she had asked of him. And I said the only sentence I had prepared in advance. The one I had written in my head in the parking lot and decided I would only use if I earned it. You kept me for the benefits, I said. They kept a seat for me. I turned around. And I did not look back. Not once. Not when Renee called my name. Not when my mother said something I could not hear and did not want to. I sat back down beside Susan. Pearl had ordered me a slice of chocolate cake while I was gone. And Danny, 20 years old, all elbows and big heart, had stuck the little restaurant candle into the center of it. One single candle. Lit. And for one moment, the symmetry of it caught in my throat. Every birthday. One candle. 24 years of one candle pressed into a grocery store cupcake, sweating on a counter while she took a call. Susan leaned over. Blow it out, sweetheart, she said softly. Make a wish. And I realized something. I didn't have one. I already had everything I had ever wished for. I was sitting in it. The trust did exactly what my grandmother had built it to do. On my 25th birthday, the distributions to Wesley and Diane Mercer ended on the date and by the terms Nana had notarized 2 years before she died. The remainder passed to me, untouched by the will my parents had spent good money revising. Because you cannot disinherit someone from a trust you don't control. Within a year, my parents sold the house on Linden Road. Their version of that night, the one where Diane is the devoted mother wronged by an ungrateful daughter, never quite took. Because too many strangers at Van Ter had watched a woman scream about everything she had paid for, while a quiet girl held hands with her real family across the room. I didn't post anything. I didn't sue anyone. I simply stopped answering. And I let the silence be the boundary, which is the only kind that ever holds. My father texted me once. 3 words. I am sorry. No name. No follow-up. I never replied. I was told that when Renee tried to rally the family to contest Nana's trust, it was Wesley who quietly shut it down. Said his mother had every right to leave her money where she pleased. That it was hers. That it was finished. He was right. He was also, as ever, a year too late, saying it to the wrong room, when it cost him nothing and changed nothing. That was the whole of my father in the end. A man who knew the right thing. Even felt it. And could only ever bring himself to do it once doing it had stopped requiring anything of him. Susan and I talk every Sunday now. 4 o'clock. The hour I used to save for Nana. Pearl taught me to make her grilled cheese. Danny still sends memes. And somewhere in a kitchen drawer, there is a photo album that doesn't close anymore, because it finally has enough pages. I spent 25 years being useful, being needed, being easy, and all of it, every single efficient, unobtrusive, well-behaved year of it, had taught me exactly one thing. Anyone who only keeps you for the benefits, has already told you in the plainest language there is, that they were never your family at all. 24 birthdays with one candle. And on the 25th, a whole table that lit them all. Without being asked. Without a single thing in return. That's the only math that ever mattered. If someone in your life only shows up when you're useful, only values you when you're producing, only loves you on a spreadsheet, this is your sign. You don't have to keep auditioning for a seat you already deserve. The people who are meant for you, they've already saved it. You just have to let yourself walk over and sit down. By the way, where are you watching this story from? Let us know in the comments below. It's truly amazing to see how far these stories travel around the world.